I spent all morning bug hunting on a handful of firmware and found some bugs reportable. Some things are going to be in detail, some things are not. We're going to have a good balance of offensive, defense, pointing out some snake oil products and things that are going on within the embedded and IoT space. So again, my name is Aaron Guzman, also known as Aaron. From Los Angeles, recently published a book up here back in November of 2017. I don't want to miss this next point. And if you were at my talk last year, I love pizza, and every single place that someone recommended last year to go check out for pizza, I went and checked out. I'm disappointed that I haven't gone anywhere yet to eat pizza, but I will tomorrow. So I am a chapter leader for OWASP Los Angeles. I am a co-organizer for AppSec California. So if anybody would like to come to LA, I mean, it's hotter here than it is in LA right now, but in last week of January, feel free to ping me. I'm involved in a lot of OWASP and Cloud Security Alliance activities. I am a project leader for the Embedded Application Security Project, also a contributor for the IoT project, and we're going to have some new documentation coming out for both the IoT and the Embedded AppSec. Currently, I'm with Gotham Digital Science, who's owned by Aon, so I head the automotive and IoT practice for testing. And I spoke at a couple conferences as well. Love to teach, definitely ask questions. Afterwards I'll be around until Sunday, basically, so I'm going to have a good time. I love being here. So let's get started talking about the kind of current state of firmware security. I'm just going to point out 3 different industry verticals. We'll talk about medical. Medical's getting better overall. Definitely has a lot of regulatory and lobbyists behind medical firmware and medical security, medical device security, and even hospitals as well, hospital medical device deployment security. But it's still pretty bad. It's a work in progress, right? Connecting medical devices to the internet, to the network, or to a network is something that's new. In automotive, it's definitely still, learning the security kind of culture. A lot of different changes going on from, a piece of, or a product, meaning the car, not facing the internet, and now it's exposed in many different interfaces. The kind of embracement of security culture is occurring now either between bug bounties, between security research, and if you pay attention to the news, there's a lot going on within automotive, whether that be the head units themselves, telematic units, OBD2 aftermarket products. There's a lot going on. But again, before it was mostly based upon obscurity, I guess you can say, access to the physical system of a vehicle and the security of that, gaining access to pull firmware, to sniff buses, and so forth. So automotive is definitely an interesting space, and again, it's a place that I kind of live in testing-wise, whether from the suppliers and OEM side as well. But let's move on to talk a little bit towards the consumer aspect. Total mess. I had in my last slide, Falcon and Linksys. I used to lead security over at Linksys for a short period of time, and I know the growing pains of trying to push a culture of security with no incentive to do so. No developers have any type of secure coding experience, never had their applications facing the web. They were basically thought that if it was over Wi-Fi, it's over the local network, it's secure, all good to go. Whether it's C, whether it's Lua, C++, PHP, ASP, all the kind of embedded languages that are used, they've never had any type of web-facing products. And again, with low margins and not a lot of incentives, it's definitely there's definitely reasons why the consumer space still has terrible security within IoT, within embedded. And one of the ideas or reasons that I put up here is lack of regulatory compliance. There's no requirements to have security. Security doesn't sell. Security features don't sell. People get compromised every day, which is fine. I mean, as long as the patching, updating cycle follows that shortly after, which is getting better for the major manufacturers. And it's also created a new separate market where we have these these devices now being deployed inline to your network or inside your home network to monitor your devices, to monitor potential threats within your home network. So to create this kind of side industry vertical that we're going to talk about in a bit, but basically promises you the world, right? We're going to prevent, O days from infecting your IoT devices, from your endpoints, your Mac OS, your Windows boxes. But there's really no proof, and we'll get to debunking some of those claims. Because in the end, security is hard. Multiple, it's everybody's responsibility. There's different aspects, especially when you're talking about embedded and IoT, as far as the different interfaces, different entry points. Everybody kind of tries to go the complex way, right? They want to, put these nice, new, shiny, JavaScript frameworks to handle all the client-side protections, but the basics of, access control and maybe user account management, things like that, are not being thought of. So I was talking about some of the big problems here, or within, I guess, the consumer space and even, the new arising industry verticals with these IoT kind of security hubs that promise, you the world again, like I said, with protecting you from things that, they have never even seen. So generally, as a security professional, I see it as snake oil, and some of the big companies out there that are selling these products, some are doing their due diligence and at least performing the basics of what you should be performing as from the hardware aspect, from the firmware aspect, and even the mobile app. But they also include, with these products, they're kind of threat intel feeds, right? But they're basically using your home network as their threat intel to cipher it and categorize all your data and send it off to their big data platform, whatever it is, and use it as samples. And they all have their own, right? As far as threat intel feeds, some of them you subscribe to, some of them are built in. But again, it's more and more data points. Everyone's heard about the Alexa, voice recording, send it off to your, your contacts. But in this case, when we're talking about these products, there's a lack of, let's say, transparency with regards to what it's built with. What's the kind of bill of materials of the device? What's the software framework that it's running on? What's the platform? Is it a real-time operating system? Is it Linux? How long is it going to be updated? When's the end of life? There's nothing like that, to kind of gauge the cleanliness or the livelihood or lifehood of the product itself. But again, like I said, there's some things where the marketing team takes it and runs with it, and in this case, it's these products that again are selling you with promises to protect you from whatever it may be, but they're not telling you why, and they're basically using kind of an obscurity type of explanation with that. But we're going to go through and kind of take apart devices and go through I guess our own research, if you will. But coming to one of the last points here, there's no certifications or attestation, right? Like how secure or how can it be guaranteed, or what level of security can it be, I guess, aware of? And I think they're working on that right now for medical, for sure. Kind of like a nutritional facts in a way. And they're requiring this for medical in the States with the FDA to have a bill of materials, software bill of materials. So all the libraries, all the frameworks that are being used, all the versions of them. And so that's a good leeway into every other industry vertical. I think even in China they're requiring software bill of materials, which is surprising, but still something that they're doing. And another problem for security and embedded in IoT is the margins. You have a device that probably costs a couple dollars, and you have to support it for 10, 15 years in the whole cloud infrastructure. There's not a lot of incentive to put a TPM or a secure element chip inside of a device for secure boot or for any type of security to store any credentials, any access keys, API keys. So you usually find a lot of exposed secrets in firmware hard-coded. Unfortunately, hopefully we learn from that. And usually if it doesn't have any type of like hardware security chip or anything like that, it's probably not secure, meaning it's not verifying firmware images, it's not validating the integrity of the data or the firmware itself. It's not, let's say, the communication, the transport security is probably not doing well either because maybe the private key is held within the client. So anything that's private, let's say a certificate that's been signed by a CA and it's hard-coded to a piece of firmware, you're going to have to reissue that certificate. Otherwise, someone can masquerade as your domain and serve up malicious content, which has happened for a big device manufacturer. And again, some of these devices as well, they're never updated. Some of them may never be even connected to the internet in some time. And let's even think about automotive, where you can't force people to update their vehicles, update their head units, update their GPS, although the mobility and connectivity of automotive moving forward is getting larger, right? Everything's getting connected, and now requirements for suppliers and things like that is to provide updates for a certain number of years via some sort of OTA function, which again opens up another attack avenue, potentially. So problems, that's all fine. We can deal with problems, just a matter of progress. But who's taking advantage of these problems and the lack of security in devices are the botnet kind of developers and creators, malicious users, nation states who are taking advantage of these vulnerable small small office, home office devices, these consumer devices that have or use the same kind of basic code base. Just to kind of go through, let's say, one of the main important ones here is Mirai. I'm sure most people here have heard of Mirai, correct? And Mirai, the biggest thing about Mirai was not just the DDoS, it was, is actually the release of source code, of Mirai source code. So now, you have super influx and all these IoT botnets being created and just targeting certain devices that, the botnet creators are choosing. And we have different examples here. Hajame and BreakerBot are more like vigilante botnets that are either Hajame is stopping killing all the services that are running, that are vulnerable. BreakerBot totally zeroes out a partition of the device and bricks it. So you have to manually reset that device to defaults, which is kind of funny, also kind of sucks. And you also have the other ones that are taking advantage of remote code execution vulnerabilities or command injection vulnerabilities. I won't speak towards all of these, but as far as like the embedded threat landscape, everyone's probably heard of Blueborn, right? And Crack, WPA2, these kind of proven protocols that have been fuzzed, tested, thought to be secure, are now evolving when we have even CPU architecture vulnerabilities that are affecting the underlying platform of the device itself. So ARM, for example, was affected by Spectre. Different ARM families, so the Cortex-M, the Cortex-A, which is like iPhones, M is microcontrollers, so vehicles, and R is for real-time systems, so it could be a number of things. It could be medical, it could be also vehicles, it could be industrial control systems. But as far as the development of these botnets, and like I said, using Mirai as a template moving forward, they're now evolving to not only change the targets, but also change the architecture itself. So ARC is a CPU architecture that was the first botnet that's been created targeting that certain architecture. Then we have some other ICS frameworks, but they're not using Mirai per se. But a lot's happening, a lot's been going on, as opposed to pre-2017, where it was mostly just CSRF botnets that are taking advantage and changing DNS configurations or admin page configurations and things like that. Now they're actually getting shell access to the device and spreading throughout the local network and infecting other devices as well. And speaking to each other, blocking out other botnets from attack. And the kind of steps to develop a botnet payload is not too complex. This is something that I kind of, gave a training yesterday. We went through some of this here, but you basically extract the firmware file system, however the folder structure is, figure out what the architecture is of your target device, whatever it may be. It could be ARM, it could be MIPS, which are probably the most common. So once you figure out the architecture and the endiness, is just the way the computer and the hardware understand bytes and bits and things like that. That's how you'll structure your payloads according to your architecture, according to your device. So your payload should have some communication towards either your C2 environment, your command and control, or your other devices that are going to be attacked for P2P, peer-to-peer communication. So once you create that, go ahead and build that with your cross-compiler. You can use an embedded build system, such as Buildroot is common. Yocto is another one. Again, these are free as well. Build up your payload that has your communication configured and whatever kind of exploits you have within your payload. Obviously, you want to test it via emulation via the device itself. And then build it into your Mirai template code according to whatever ports that your target device is listening on, whatever banner you're looking for. Again, with Mirai's target template for botnets, super easy. It's out on the web, and it's little to no effort almost. Like I said, simple-ish 7 steps, but it's something that can easily be done, especially someone with no experience and who wants to, create malicious software or test certain situations, or it could be used for red teaming actually, to pivot throughout a network, move laterally, whatever it may be. And basically, the developers for these botnets are, thinking that the whole internet's going to be doomed because, again, it's so easy. Everything is being infected. I think there's over 300, 400,000 devices that are infected between different botnets, whether that's Perserai, whether that's Ajami. Anybody ever play Altered Beast before? Old school? Some hands? Okay. You don't know Altered Beast, it's a great game. But what they're doing as far as a developer for these botnets is they're targeting whatever has the highest impact, and that's something that you would do as a pen tester. You're assessing a device or you're assessing a network. You want to target whatever has the biggest payout. And in this case, you can target the supply chain of how the device is created, and the middleman who creates the base stack level code, like the file system, the operating system. In this case, that would be the original design manufacturer, the ODM, otherwise known as supplier or a white labeling development firm who builds code and then sells it off to a number of different OEMs. And this is common for almost every industry vertical. Basically, whoever can develop a piece of software faster than in-house, or maybe it's cheaper, or maybe you're outsourcing to India, China, Taiwan, whatever it may be. That supplier has their code base, their services running, their configurations, their debug, backdoor code, within a number of different types of devices that are sold to these OEMs. So in this case, we have Zhangmai here, who was responsible for Mirai, who shipped their code and sold it to a number of different NVR, IP cameras, doorbells, routers, whatever you can think of, you name it. Zhangmai sold it to him. That's kind of the base of Mirai. What we've yet to see is the suppliers in different industry verticals, either whether that's medical or even automotive in this case, where you have a major supplier for head units, telematic systems, or the platforms for telematic systems, QNX, for example, and that propagate out to a number of different types of vehicles. But it's common. You'll see a ton of different OEM manufacturers using QNX with different configurations, but if there's a piece of dead code that has hard-coded credentials, that has a backdoor, whatever it may be, that's left over from the ODM, and the OEM doesn't have the code to review that black box binary, it's going to be shipped, and that's the way it's going to be. And again, flashing some of these products and devices, it may never happen, and you can never force it, and there's so many different variables, in the event you want to force an update, let's say for an OTA use case to update a car. You lose connectivity, it's expensive for the OEMs, a lot of different use cases. So again, very, very easy to figure out who the supplier is. That could be through reconnaissance and then targeting that specific supplier, looking for those vulnerable devices to attack and compromise and essentially create a botnet. And some basic kind of firmware exploitation methods is, again, we talked about recon, figuring out who that supplier is, what their products are, and then obviously you have to get a piece of firmware to review, to analyze, to, again, target your architecture, that endiness we talked about, build your payload, try to find some vulnerabilities within the software stack, and execute. Execute it with emulating the firmware, performing dynamic analysis, runtime analysis, and so forth. So that's generally, what a kind of malware developer for IoT botnets, or even pen testers, whatever it may be, if you want to perform some research on your free time, such as, this morning, 7 a.m. to 1:30, something that I did, could gather, any number of information from the web on, let's say you can't find the firmware, via forums, via support. What could be a good use of recon is subdomains, subdomain takeover issues. You'll see archive sites that have legacy firmware. You'll even see, I've been lucky and pulled firmware for a certain number of vehicles via archive sites that were once, password protected and are not anymore. So things to keep in mind, kind of different methods you can use. Usually, let's say that the software methods don't work, where you can't get access to the firmware, or you can't get a root shell or anything like that. You're probably going to try to go the hardware method and try to pull the firmware either through hardware, whether that be UART, JTAG, SPI, or just sniff the buses and test points that are left in every piece of hardware, because there has to be test points for manufacturing. There's no question about it. It's just a matter of security controls from the manufacturing side, what they're placing as far as either username or password, or is it some sort of security feature or anti-tampering technique for hardware-wise, and are there any controls for firmware? Again, I talked about secure boot, integrity, things like that during startup. Verifying whether the piece of firmware is legitimate and from the manufacturer themselves. And some tools I think these are probably the main tools to get started, at least, into analyzing pieces of firmware. Definitely binwalk, right? People have heard of binwalk before. It's installed on Kali Linux. It's still being actively worked on. If you take a look at GitHub, it had latest commit probably within the week. There's other newer tools, and most of them are Python based, right? Binwalk's Python. Firmware analysis toolkit's Python. That helps with the automation of emulating our firmware, so we can test and not have hardware. That way we don't have to buy something. It's kind of a gray area, right? But that's how we can try the product and test out the product before we actually buy the hardware, put it on my desk, because I don't want an extra device I already have racks, literally racks in my office, in my house, with enough products. So if I can emulate it, by all means I will. You can use, again, firmware analysis toolkit for that. And that's actually a wrapper for Firmidine, which is another wrapper for key moves. It's basically a virtual machine type of, it's a platform for virtual machines and emulating binaries for certain platforms, MIPS, ARM, whatever it may be. Then as far as, when you want to analyze the file system contents, let's say you extract the file system, you see that it has, the bin, dev, etc, user sbin, things like that. You can point firmwalker to automate some of the analysis for you, or at least parse it for you for hard-coded passwords, private keys. It's basically a bash script that Craig Smith wrote. He's the guy who responsible for the Car Hacker's Handbook. So it's a good tool. It's a free tool. It's definitely modular as well. And again, some of these tools, except Binwalk, were not around like 3 years ago. There's even more tools. I'm just giving you a few here. But last but not least, the firmware analysis comparison toolkit is another Python-based tool, but basically you can drag and drop your .img, .bin, .tx, whatever your firmware is, and it'll do automated analysis for you. So thankfully, the university over in Germany has been working on this specific tool for drones and military and for their own purposes. But again, another free tool. But just keep in mind the amount of resources it needs. I don't know if anybody has an extra 16-core, 64 gig rig laying around, but what I usually do is drag and drop my firmware and go to sleep, wake up, see what's going on, see and then do it the next day again. Otherwise, it'll consume obviously all your RAM. But it's similar to the mobile security space. With mobile security, they have a lot of free Python tools as well, a lot of different support for Android and iOS. iOS not so much, but they have a similar tool called Mobile Security Framework. Literally drag and drop the Android app, for example, into a web application. So our tools are evolving. They're free. We have more enabled to do research, more enabled to validate and verify and check what these manufacturers are claiming, and it's fun. It's fun to find issues. Also fun to fix issues. That's usually the point, is to discover these flaws, but also help them fix them. Hopefully they're open to it. Usually they are, and I think now the culture's shifting in the industry as a whole. Probably can't see that, but this is the web UI for firmware analysis comparison toolkit. But it categorizes even usernames and passwords. It has Binwalk in there by default and extracts your file system for you in an automated way. I would definitely check it out if you want to get into some firmware analysis. Like I said, you don't have to know anything to use the tool, but it does have coverage issues. Obviously, it's not going to look for specific things related to the industry vertical. It's only looking for certain strings, certain expressions, things like that. So menu analysis is definitely a must, but with free tools, it's easier to help again promote research and to learn and expose people who should be sharing what licensing is used for. If you're using GPL, you're supposed to publish your source code, right? And this is a kind of a controversial topic, right? Not everybody even does this, right? Not everyone publishes their source code if they're using GPL. I know over at Linksys, we basically didn't publish on our support side. We had it on someone's random GitHub for the WRTs as an example. But basically, this device is a semantic Norton core home router is what it is. So it's supposed to secure your local network, and it's using a version of OpenWRT. And again, they're called out for not releasing their source code and not abiding by certain licensing. But again, controversial, but it's cool, right? Because we're all hackers and we can figure it out. So here's the router that I was just mentioning. It has an intrusion prevention system. It has deep packet inspection. So it's basically looking at all your traffic. It's one of those it is semantic. So it's they have LifeLock already. So they already want your whole life basically in your house. So they're going to look through all your traffic. They already have your social for the people who do have LifeLock. I don't know if you guys know that's basically one of those identity protection services. But the idea is, again, to secure your entire kind of, personal identity and your traffic and your devices, your IoT devices and personal devices from attacks and from, they say backdoors, but I don't know how you can prevent them from the backdoor. It's hard-coded into a piece of firmware. So unless they're doing research, which I doubt. So there's this company called Betty who did some good research on this product specifically, and I spent some time earlier looking through it, pulling down the firmware, sifting through, seeing what I can find. As far as the research is concerned, they've actually done their due diligence and invested in a kind of secure hardware platform, or with a chip that has a secure element, and they have secure boot enabled through Qualcomm, and they also have integrity checks, and they verify their certificate chains, which again, these should be, right, if we're promising the world. But at the end of the day, they didn't do some basic things like encrypt their firmware as one instance. So you can literally download the latest firmware just with this curl request. All it's looking for is if it's coming from this host, which is pretty funny. But it ended up being, there's a remote code execution, command injection via Bluetooth to get access to the firmware, and then pull the firmware from there. But at the end of the day, they've done some of their due diligence, and you have other products out there. So we just talked about the Norton Core router. There's other routers like ThingBox. Again, they either go in line with your router or they listen passively. And ThingBox is based on Ubuntu Core, and it has their own similar kind of thread intel, right? So Symantec has their own thread intel, which is their feeds. ThingBox has their own, which is Digital Fence. Probably not as common. They have a Thing iOS app that you can usually kind of inventory or enumerate all the devices on their network. I guess the kind of cool thing, and this release, all these devices that I'm going to talk about released last year, or within the last year. So this one released in late August of last year. But the cool thing is that it scans your external IP space and closes up ports and sends you reports on what's open and what's closed. So when you think about UPnP and the vulnerabilities of piercing your firewall access controllers, or your NAT basically, can help you with, from that aspect. But it's not something that's been popped open yet. I was trying to get the firmware earlier, didn't have no luck, but I'm going to keep trying. I'll probably just buy the device and pop it open. But the next one is Bitdefender Box. Anybody heard of this one before? Similar thing, plugs into your network. Embedded did some additional research here. First with Bitdefender, but it uses web filtering for malicious sites, kind of, with like DNS as an example, and there's any type of phishing or anything like that, potential malicious sites, it'll redirect you to kind of a splash page. But again, this is one of those ones that claims to identify backdoors, claims to identify vulnerabilities in software, and different versions of vulnerabilities in software, which was debunked and proven not to. Basically what Embedded did was put a vulnerable camera that had command injections, that had published CVEs on the network for over a week. No alerts, nothing happened. And along the same lines, this device is supposed to do a vulnerability assessment. So it's supposed to actively probe and perform a number of different tests. It doesn't say how, it doesn't say what type of methods, or if they're using a third party, whatever it may be. But basically they weren't doing anything. What Embedded did was, again, put that camera, put another vulnerable D-Link device, and then exploited a non-reported bug, a 0-day, within D-Link, a D-Link product, and Box did nothing. So again, one of those things where, if you're buying these products to, secure, be more aware, identify potential threats, and again, promising you the world is definitely not, the route to go if you're not even, doing your own due diligence as a manufacturer. Basically, the marketing team running with it. The funny thing, though, is they had a backdoor, and the backdoor was a hard-coded SSH access for their support team once you reboot the device, which again is terrible. You should never do that. Never do that. That was Embedded, right? Checking if they're walking it like they're talking it, and they definitely aren't. Totally debunked. Product is not what it claims to be. They have a version 2, but I hear it's all of the same. Development, production builds, a lot of commented code. Here's some other common ones here. You have Netgear's Armor, which is powered by Bitdefender, the same people from Box who weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. But no, I guess they're working together, partnering, and again, it's supposed to do that vulnerability assessment we're talking about here. Promising you to scan all your devices, unauthorized access, It's interesting to me, again, these claims that, again, they haven't proven, and then the DNS safe browsing with malicious sites. I still love the zero-day exploits, because obviously you can protect from zero-day exploits. So again, I poked around this. I spent some time yesterday, right before the training class that I instructed, and right away found a private key, server key. I ended up finding multiple private keys, and I found multiple certificates, hard-coded certificates, user backdoor accounts. Be warned that this specific device doesn't even have the Netgear armor yet. I was looking at it, and it's not even released. So if this device, they can't even secure their own device, it might not be great, to secure your whole network. But yeah, I found some hard-coded web service credentials, and they use this really outdated Apache access server, not even access 2. So this is like 2011 or 2010, something like that. But yeah, I didn't try to access the admin interface or anything like that. Just saw that they had it there. Make sure it was up, basically. But yeah, a lot of bad things. Again, hard coding secrets on the client side mean whether that's the firmware, whether that's a mobile app, whether that's anything that the client, you as a user has control over, unless it's protected by a hardware chip, a secure element, it's never a good idea. We have ASUS AI protection. This was quite funny. This is another one again. I was hacking away earlier. They have this idea of Pro and Classic, where you have basically IPS enabled in line with your network traffic. And again, all of these devices are in line within your. They could be either in line within your traffic, so plugged in directly from your router, actually from your modem to your router. And you're connecting, through Wi-Fi, whatever it may be, or just passively listening on the network. But again, another one that does web filtering or DNS filtering, and the Pro, it has IPS functionality, and the Classic does not. But it's based on Trend Micro, so you have Bitdefender, Trend Micro, partnering up. This is good though, right? I mean, at least there's some sort of trying to build it into a product, trying to build into consumer devices, where again, there's absolutely nothing. Or was absolutely nothing, a few years ago. So at least there's, some sort of, security-ish features that are being built in. But again, there are more data points that they're pulling from you as consumers, your devices, what you're doing, what you're watching. Again, selling that data to third parties, and not even protecting the communication between, their devices to their cloud infrastructure. So yeah, they have anybody have one of these ASUS devices? No worries. They have, it's pretty cool. I mean, I guess they have their, router security assessment checks for vulnerabilities. But again, I was looking through a piece of firmware yesterday, this morning actually, through a number of devices that have this feature enabled for Pro. And again, identify a number of different hard-coded URLs with API keys. And I didn't put them up here because again, I didn't report them. But the funniest one I found was an EC2 instance for, it could be a developer. But aside from, we'll get back to the hard-coded URL or EC2 instance. But found a number of different private certificates that were within the firmware, as well as over 50 foreign IPs that were hard-coded into firmware. So it's talking to third parties that you may not even know about. But coming back to this URL here, obviously my first reaction if I see something EC2 Amazon, I'm gonna plug it into the URL and see what I get. And I got someone's actual real network. They were actually connected. There was 5 client devices to this network. No username or password, so I thought I'd take a look at what AI protection had to offer, right? That's all I did though, don't worry. And here's a little screenshot. They have the router security assessment. Obviously, there's some danger here. But this is only one instance. I found multiple instances of the same occurrence, but different URLs for different firmware images. So it's scary. And again, for firmware, you can't delete firmware from someone's workstation or someone's device themselves. It's going to be there forever, basically. And people are learning from that. Like D-Link is now password protecting their legacy like firmware images. Although they're not very strong, but I mean, there's one type of defense, if you will. But once I saw that hard-coded URLs and plugged them in, I was good. I was like, this is exactly what I need, to figure out, some of the secrets, some of the issues, figure out what this product actually has to offer, which is not much, unfortunately. Not yet. It's maturing. It's within the first few years. Again, all of them really. They're all learning, unfortunately. We're all learning with them. So there's more. Again, I'm going to report some of the bugs that I found earlier today. But switching over to another type of consumer device, which is a vehicle, is the Audi and kind of Volkswagen research that happened about 2 months ago now, where they selectively went through and enumerated basically vehicles that had the most attack surface, whether that's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, USBs, different types of head units, and what they did was exploit a vulnerability within the Wi-Fi daemon, I guess, when you're connected locally, and got shallow access to the platform to the head unit. In this case, it's running a real-time operating system, QNX, and just so you know, QNX is QNX 7 and above. 7 and above has loads of security features. In this case, again, a vehicle that was just purchased, which is what they did. It wasn't fully updated, and it was exploited, and the research is fully out there about that. But the QNX or real-time operating systems are not bulletproof. If you happen to look into the differences between embedded Linux and real-time operating systems, the underlying technology or how they communicate is completely different, but you can still open up attack surfaces within real-time operating systems as you could with embedded Linux, such as using POSIX utilities like cat, grep, whatever it may be for command injection as an example, which is what happened here. So they had Telnet. Why would you have Telnet, on the head unit? But it is what it is. I'm not going to go through that. Probably testing. I don't know. Everything's for testing. And we'll go to the latest one here is the BMW research. Anybody heard of this one? Yeah? Multiple remote code executions. These guys did some crazy work. Not only went through the head unit of the vehicle, they also took apart the telematics device itself and reverse engineered both of the firmwares for the head unit as well as the telematics unit. So, and also had multiple remote code executions locally, plugging into USB, as well as through Bluetooth. I think there's another method, so they have, I think, 3 or 4 ways to get remote code execution to your vehicle. Just crazy. But again, another old device, old QNX version, 6.5. Again, good research, super detailed. They haven't released all the details as far as what they did, how they found it, and what the tools they used. They're giving obviously the manufacturer the chance to fix it. I think it's proposed to be fixed next year. It is what it is, but so more and more research, right? Previously, automotive research was almost shunned, or from the lawyer perspective, the book was thrown at them. We weren't enabled, we didn't have enough tools or expertise maybe. And even for QNX as an example, real-time operating systems, they are commercial license-based, so you have to be a developer with them or a partner with them, with the company, in order to use their tools, know the underlying technology, the development of the platform, as opposed to embedded Linux, where you have full access to all the build tools and libraries and frameworks. So with QNX, like I said, license, it's I guess you can say it would be more obscurity because a lot of people don't have access, but now with more and more research, there's more and more access. And now we can see that BMWs run a Pentium Celeron, at the least. So fun stuff, right? There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to any embedded device, any product that you're assessing. And again, we're talking about, whether that be an IoT device, and I guess a vehicle is a type of IoT device, but there's probably, I think over 60, 70 or 80, different microcontrollers and ECUs in a vehicle, different in-vehicle networks. In this case, even with BMW, they're running Ethernet. So they plugged in USB to Ethernet and got an IP address for like a debug interface. Again, debug testing always seems to be the trend. And it's about finding and sifting through and seeing how you can get the same access as a developer, basically. Now all you need is just one issue, one bug, one problem, within the development of the product itself. In this case, they found that issue, and the same thing. It's that kind of defense in depth approach is what you should be having. Anybody know Drake? Yeah? Probably not. Okay. So I'm going to close off with kind of the proactive things that maybe manufacturers should be doing is getting down to the basics, removing dead code, removing potential backdoors. Working on access management, identity access management. I know a big thing within again, automotive is mobility and identity within mobility. So keeping that fluent throughout the in-vehicle networks, as well as the mobile app, as well as the cloud infrastructure. Same thing goes for IoT devices as well. We have different developers responsible for different aspects of the product, whether that's startup, shutdown, querying the current function, whatever feature it may be. Again, a lot of cooks in the kitchen is how I referenced it earlier. And it's hard to, kind of bring together one product, one device, a lot of different code bases, a lot of different styles, a lot of different backgrounds, different partners and suppliers, all within the development supply chain. Again, defense in depth is something that you want to shoot for. Hardware-wise, firmware-wise, wireless-wise, whether it's Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. Again, as an example, vehicles have a huge attack surface that they didn't have before, and now code that was once expected not to be exposed is being exposed and being exploited, and will continue to be. And it's not a bad thing. It's just matter of fixing the issues, working on the maturity and the culture of research and of researchers, and enabling and encouraging people like us to keep finding bugs. Especially when we have enough, resources and tools, and hopefully, the knowledge is acquired to start testing, and especially for manufacturers, again, like continuous testing. You definitely need to keep testing and testing. I know usually they're siloed off, right? I talked about some developers are, focused on one specific feature. Others are focused on, firmware update as an example, and I know the in-vehicle guys don't talk to like the telematics guys, and vice versa. They're like, oh, they're the IT guys, we're the product guys. We don't talk to each other at all. But creating that culture within a company, and again, not only through automotive, but any industry vertical, and enforce some sort of continuous security testing, whether that be through source code, whether that be through dynamic testing. We have, again, for consumer, for ARM and MIPS, a ton of tools to emulate. Again, we don't want to buy hardware if we don't have to. So definitely make use of those. And my last but not least, like I was doing earlier, totally just get lost in the sauce. Find some bugs, find some issues, get into it, put some music on if you're a girl, put your hair in a ponytail, figure it out, get it done. And again, have fun is basically the goal, and feel free to ping me at any time. I would definitely love to help anybody's research project. I love finding bugs. And that's it. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
So are there any questions? Several. Start right there.
It seems quite bad, to be honest, from what you say. Have you got any stars on the show, any shining examples of it done very well?
I mean, there's different levels, right? It's, like I said, defense in depth is the idea. I think Symantec did a good job, surprisingly. They did a good job to ensure firmware was secure in a way that you can't sideload your own software. They had secure boot, and even in memory, the memory was configurations were encrypted even, which again is not common. And they invested from the beginning, so they actually designed the product with a secure platform, as opposed to a lower margin, cheaper device with no chip to store secrets or anything like that, or for secure memory. And I think it's just well they're selling those devices, right? I think all these devices that I talked about, the box, the Symantec, they're all around the same price, about 200 to 250. But I think everyone's learning. It's only the first year. They're promising way too much, and it's just like any other security product, right? And everyone's kind of the zero-day thing, the machine learning, and hopefully we'll see a turn. Again, there's a lot of guidance and documentation around how to securely code for web. You can reference OWASP's Application Security Verification Standard. Same thing for mobile. There's Application Security Verification Standard for mobile. Embedded project, the one that I helped lead. And there's a ton of benchmarks for platform security. If it's on a certain commercial-based platform, a real-time operating system, that consult with the vendor, because that's definitely something that you pay for as I guess consumer of that specific platform. But yeah, it sounds bad. It's just the claims that they're making marketing-wise are not lining up one-to-one, and we're having to, as researchers, kind of go through and verify and validate. Hey, is X, Y, and Z what they're saying? Is that true? And also, why is my device talking to, a number of different IPs that I don't know? For example, they're talking to the third parties that I may not be aware of, and they're not upfront about that either. Transparent. It's very much a marketing data sheet that it's just a magic kind of placebo effect when you think you're going to keep your device secure, but your network secure and your devices, but they're false claims. But hopefully, I don't know. We'll see if that gets better as far as they stop marketing zero-day defense and also enforcing some active defense through IPSs maybe if they want, but. That's all your data. If you're going to put it through a product, your data's going somewhere else too. So privacy issues. I don't know how they're feeling about GDPR right now, but that's another thing.
Hello. I have a question about the routers. Is there any brand that you've seen that have less vulnerabilities, that either a consumer or a corporate device that you could recommend?
I mean, every device is going to have issues and vulnerabilities. It's just a matter of, how fast the manufacturer responds. And gladly, the manufacturers, aside from things which, hasn't been researched, they've all patched the issues that we talked about. I don't want to send some to ACES, but they all have the pros and cons, really. It's just a matter of, comfortability, the usage. And again, if you're sending all your data through one device, it's again that whole situation. If you want identity protection, you have to give your social, you have to give all your details to get secure. Make your best judgment if you can, and if you have the opportunity to, perform some research on the device before, I'd recommend that. But I wouldn't have a specific vendor. It's just arms race and a matter of how fast they're fixing issues that are discovered by researchers and their culture. And I think. For, let's say, routers like ASUS and D-Link, they got slapped in the hand really hard by the FTC over in the States. They got sued, I forgot how much, $20,000 or something like that, and have to get pen tests for 20 years, which has never happened before. But because they were false marketing that easy to secure, secure by default, which they weren't. But now regulatory, bodies are kind of getting involved when it is affecting privacy and safety now. So there's kind of a plus there, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, for sure.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions right now, but I'm sure you can find our later.
Yeah, I'll be here. Sorry, guys.
Great. Thank you so much.